Moving on now to our presentation today, Dr. Lee Brown, former director of the Institute for Aboriginal Health in the College of Health Disciplines at the University of British Columbia. He was also the director of Indigenous Doctoral Program in the Department of Educational Studies at UBC. His doctoral thesis was entitled Making the Classroom Healthy, a Healthy Place, the Development of Affective Competency and Aboriginal Pedagogy. An important topic, I think, for everyone who is interested in comparative pedagogy and improving the way we teach courses for everyone of every background. He's also the co-author of The Sacred Tree, an educational curriculum based in Aboriginal values and epistemology of the Medicine Wheel. He has been contributing to the Round Lake Native Healing Center in Vernon, British Columbia during the last 40 years in a number of capacities, including clinical supervisor, counselor, and currently as a cultural resource to this particular center. So today we will be quite excited and honored to hear him present about the great law of peace and the most holy book. Lee, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the Wilmette Institute's webinar series, and we're very much looking forward to hearing your presentation today.
Thank you, Rob. I'm very happy to be here today. I'm very honored to have this opportunity to present on a subject that I care a lot about, of course. I had the opportunity to be the faculty supervisor on the first class on the Baha'i faith at the University of British Columbia, and I did a guest lecture in the class and on the great law of peace, and one of the students in the class said, that sounds a lot like the Kitab-i Aqdas, so I began a path of comparative study. As I begin today, I'd like to acknowledge Chief Phil Lane, who was the person that gave me the first Baha'i book. I was in a ceremony and I heard what I thought was my grandfather tell me to ask Phil for a book, and I asked him for a book, and he gave me some Baha'i books, and that was my journey towards the Baha'i faith began. I'd also like to acknowledge Ruby Gubatayo, who took me to my first fireside at Bill and Clara Tyler's house on the Neah Bay Reservation on the west coast of Washington State. I'm a Cherokee person myself. I was born for the Wolf Clan, and my spiritual name is Seinusti. This is a painting by a Baha'i artist who I think is of a Huron background of the beans, squash, and corn of the Iroquois people. I'd like to dedicate the talk today to Jim and Melva Loft. Jim was born near Eagle Ridge, which is the birthplace of the Peacemaker, which is now on the Tyendinaga Mohawk First Nation, but at one time was a Huron territory. Jim was the first Mohawk to recognize the return of the Peacemaker, and he's buried near Eagle Ridge. I'm dedicating this presentation to him and his wife, Melba, who had this spiritual eyes to recognize the coming of the Peacemaker as a prophet, and then more importantly, to recognize the return of the promised one of the Iroquois and the embodiment of Baha'u'llah. They were tireless teachers who announced as much as possible in their time and place the return of the great peace. 1912 was a big year. You know, it was 1912. Jim Loft was 4 years old, and he was sitting on a fence post by Oshawa, Ontario, when a train went by, and a man was standing on the back of the train in a long white robe and waved to him, and he felt such power he actually fell off the fence. And of course, that man was Abdu'l-Baha. It took Jim 40 years to find out who the man in the long white robe that waved at him was. And also in 1912, Chief John Gibson did a recitation of the great law and the teachings of the company of the law, which is usually around a 10-day recitation. It was recorded in a book called Concerning the League. And for the most part in this talk, when I'm quoting the Peacemaker, I'm quoting the writing of Chief John Gibson. So I'm going to begin with several introductory statements, a little bit about the Peacemaker and Baha'u'llah, and a little bit about the two laws. And then we're going to look at some statements of law that are, in my opinion, surprisingly similar. So the Peacemaker said, "It will be as though they have but one mind. and they are a single person with only one body, and one head, and one life, which means that there will be unity. Baha'u'llah said, "Oh my God, unite the hearts of thy servants, reveal to them thy great purpose. May they follow in thy commandments and abide in thy law." And notice here the important relationship between the hearts and the purification of the hearts and the ability to recognize and abide in the law. Peacemaker said, "When all are relatives, every nation, then there will be peace." The Peacemaker created relationship among the nations by reestablishing the clan system. And because people who are a member of a clan feel that they are also related to people of other tribes who are in the same clan, it created a kind of unity. Baha'u'llah has advised us to create this unity through intermarriage of different religions and different races. One day I was sitting in a faculty cafeteria at UBC, and I was in an education symposium that I knew was going to be kind of boring. So I found a really comfortable seat in the back of the symposium hall, and I was struggling to stay awake and almost falling asleep. And as I was doing so, I had this inspiration, this insight, this thought that Black Elk, the Lakota holy man who had the great vision, had that vision at the very time that Baha'u'llah was writing the Kitab-i Aqdas on the other side of the world. Now, I didn't know if that was true or not, but I was so excited by the thought. I left the symposium, went back to my office and got on the computer. And you may or may not know that the Kitab-i Aqdas, the Baha'i law, was not written all at once. It was written generally, most of it was written between 1871 and 1875. Black Elk was born in 1863. He had his great vision in 1872 when he was 9 years old. 1872 is the year that the bulk of the Kitab-i Aqdas was written. I've come to believe that Black Elk's vision is really a statement in symbolic form about the Kitab-i Aqdas itself and the coming of the law. And I'd be very interested to know what other people think of that. But he had this vision that, he saw two wise ones coming from the east, and between them rose a daybreak star. They gave to him an herb, and it was the herb of understanding. And I've come to believe that the herb of understanding is the law, and that it dropped on the ground and it sprang into a tree. And the tree is a symbol of the law itself. And it flowered into a stem of blue, white, red, and yellow, representing the unity of the people, because the law brings justice, and the justice brings a peace that provides a unity for democracy to spring forth. The Peacemaker and Baha'u'llah had very sacred verse. They say that a saint in youth is a saint in truth. The prophets usually evidence themselves early in life with unusual behavior, high quality behavior from the beginning of their life to the end. And that was the case with both the Peacemaker and Baha'u'llah. The Peacemaker was born in Huron, one of the northernmost Iroquois peoples on the shores of Lake Ontario. A recently written PhD pinpoints his date of birth at around 1142, according to astronomical events that happened in the heavens around the time that he was born. He was given a name that came to him in a dream that is usually not mentioned except in ceremony, but when I'm reading statements that have his name, I will read them. I will mention his name today in this presentation. You notice it's spelled differently, and I have the spelling in accordance with the way it was written by the original writers. And his mother was told that his name would be Daganawida, that no one would ever have this name, and that he was born to be a messenger of peace. The Peacemaker told his mother, as a young man of only 4 or 5 years old, that he had been sent by the one that made the earth and the moon and the sun and the stars, and that the one that made the earth and the moon and the sun and the stars had sent him because he was dismayed with the violence among the the Iroquois people at that time, and he had been sent to bring peace to the enemies of the Hurons. Baha'u'llah, as I think probably most of you know, was born a descendant of prophets and kings in 1817 in Tehran. And he was a son of a very notable father, and he was a descendant of the prophet Zoroaster and as well as the kings of Persia. Peacemaker traveled and taught among the Iroquois people for 40 years before the Confederacy was established. It was a time of great difficulties. He went through many tests and many tribulations. And the first to accept the peace was Hiawatha, that we know today historically as Hiawatha. When the Peacemaker was a young man, he went into the woods and he was carving with some other boys that went with him, and they carved a white stone canoe. And when he came of age around 14, he left his mother's and grandmother's home and began to paddle towards Mohawk territory to bring his message of peace. And he brought that message, and he united 5 nations into a spiritual consultative democracy. And those 5 nations were the Mohawk, the Seneca, the Cayuga, the Oneida, and the Onondaga. Shortly thereafter, the Tuscarora Nation joined the League, and from then on, the League has been known as the Six Nations Confederacy. Peacemaker chose a pine tree as a symbol of the Confederacy, the tree of the great long leaves. The tree has 4 symbolic white roots, and there's a teaching that when the white roots, since the time the tree was planted at the center of the democracy, are growing, and when they touch on the other side of the earth, the law will come again. The great law of peace established the institution of the Longhouse as a system of government and laws. The great law of peace is 117 statements of law that govern the Confederacy. And the law has 3 fundamental principles. This picture here, Rob mentioned that I work at the Native Healing Center here in British Columbia, and this is a picture of the Round Lake Native Healing Center on the Okanagan First Nation at the north end of the Okanagan Valley. I can't help but have a few pictures of my children in this presentation, so can't help myself. The first principle of the law is peace, and peace means health, a healthy body, and in that healthy body, it brings peace to the people. So a duty of the chiefs is to make sure that people have a good diet, that their people are healthy. The second principle is power. It means a civil authority. It means the power of the government. It also has a second meaning of the power of the individual in relationship to the Creator. And the third principle is righteousness, which is a good word in action. It means justice, justice for all. It means proper conduct. The Longhouse is essentially a house of justice. The Kitab-i Aqdas is 190 statements of laws, ordinances, and regulations that guide the Baha'i world, and it gives rise to 10 foundational principles. It's important to note here that the principles of the law are what really bring the contour of the law to the time and place in which it appears. They give rise to justice. Justice is one of the most important things that arise from the law, because without justice, you cannot have peace. Without peace, you cannot have democracy. So justice is very important in both the Kitab-i Aqdas and the Great Law of Peace. Baha'i principles, and each of these principles relate to enabling justice. These are the principles that will give rise to justice, and justice on an individual level is fairness, give rise to fairness among the people, the oneness of humanity, the equality of men and women, the elimination of all forms of prejudice, universal peace upheld through a world government, an independent investigation of truth, the oneness of all religions, the harmony of science and religion, university compulsory education, and a universal auxiliary language. Any one of these would contribute to a higher order level of justice in the world. Any one of these would contribute to a greater state of peace and elimination of the violence that comes from hatreds and prejudices. And very importantly, and we see this becoming more and more important as time goes by, a spiritual solution to economic problems, the elimination of the extremes of wealth and poverty. Prophets do four things. They announce themselves. They call the people to remember the Creator, to return to the Creator. They call the people to remember the law, and they plant the law in the land. And the Peacemaker and Baha'u'llah did these. Peacemaker announced himself when he was in that white canoe and he was heading toward the land of the Mohawk people, which of course would have been an enemy at that time. And it was amazing that he, survived this first encounter. And when he met the first of the Mohawks that he was going to share his teachings with, it is recorded in that oral tradition that he said this: "I carry the mind of the Master of Life." I love that sentence. I carry the mind of the Master of Life, and my message will bring an end to the wars between the East and the West. The word I bring is that all people shall love one another and live together in peace. They say that when his mother and grandmother had the dreams of his coming, in one of the dreams, the handsome man that appeared said that the Peacemaker would be the principal person in both the sky world and the world of the earth. The principal person, the number one person in heaven and earth. Baha'u'llah announced himself in the Kitab-i Aqdas and states that in Article 78, "O kings of the earth, he who is the sovereign Lord of all is come. The kingdom is God's, the omnipotent, the protector, the self-subsisting." So we can see here that Baha'u'llah is saying that he is a sovereign Lord of all. And in the dream, the Peacemaker's mother said the Peacemaker is the principal person in the sky world and in the world of the earth. Prophets call people to remember the Creator. In the oral tradition, it says when the Peacemaker was born, the very word for Creator had almost been lost, and he had to seek for the word. And he announced himself, and that's recorded in Article 7 of the Great Law, where the Peacemaker states, "The Confederate chiefs shall express gratitude to the messengers of the Creator who reveal his wishes, and to the great Creator who dwells in the heavens above." So the Peacemaker is doing two things here. He's asking the people to remember the Creator and to remember the messengers of the Creator, the Creator's representative. That's a word that I really like for prophet, the Creator's representative. Baha'u'llah, in Article 1 of the Kitab-i Aqdas, states, "The first duty prescribed by God for his servants is a recognition of him who is the dayspring of his revelation and the fountains of his laws." So in this statement, Baha'u'llah is asking people to also remember the Creator's representative and to pay attention to what the Creator's representative is saying, and also mentioning the Creator. So both of these statements mention the Creator and the importance of listening to the messengers of the Creator. Prophets call people to the law. The Peacemaker said in Article 28 of the Great Law, "Return to the way of the great law, which is just and right." It is our belief that there's only one law, and that law functions in a certain way in the spirit world, and it functions in a different way in the physical world. But it is the same law. And it is also the law of our personal being, of our physical body. It's a law of our being. And the law of the heavens and the law of the earth and law of our being is one law. And when the prophets bring the law in a way that can be understood in a particular time and place, it enables us as human beings to live in a way that brings us into peace and harmony and balance with the one law that exists. And so here the Peacemaker is saying, return to that law. Baha'u'llah said in Article 7 of the Kitab-i Aqdas, whenever my laws appear, like the sun in the heaven of mine utterance, they must be faithfully obeyed by all. As I mentioned, prophets plant the law or place the law or relate the law to a place and to a land. In Article 1 of the Great Law, the Peacemaker says, I am Daganawida, and with the 5 nations Confederate chiefs, I plant the tree of great peace, which represents the law. I plant it in your territory. And the place it was planted, they say, is around Syracuse, New York. Baha'u'llah said in the Kitab-i Aqdas, the most great law hath been revealed in this spot. Notice that spot is capitalized, and it is capitalized in the original. To me, that means that it's a sacred place that's being referenced. It's a sacred spot. Blessed is a spot, and the city in the heart where the law is planted. And this place where the law is planted, Baha'u'llah says, is a scene of transcendent splendor. From that place, the law emanates, and the emanation is one of justice and peace. In the native world, there's a concept, comes from our Lakota brothers and sisters, but I think other tribes have it as well, of the Good Red Road. And we're just approaching here the north end of the Good Red Road, which is June 21st. The sun travels from June 21st to December 21st, north and south on the Good Red Road. And if you're ever in Saskatchewan where it's very flat, and you are up maybe fasting on the mountain just before the sun comes up, you'll notice a red line that appears on the horizon. That's called the Good Red Road. They say that's a vision of the Creator. And in that red road, as it goes around the world every 24 hours, the Creator sees everything. And they say that that good red road exists in the human being as a path from the mind to the heart. And both Baha'u'llah and the Peacemaker comment on this concept in the laws that they promulgated. Baha'u'llah said in the Kitab-i Aqdas, Article 16, adorn your heads with the garlands of trustworthiness and faithfulness, your hearts with the attire of the fear of God, your tongues with absolute truthfulness, your bodies with the vesture of courtesy. We have here the concept of the importance of the good mind and the importance of the good heart. And between the good heart and the good mind is the good voice. Peacemaker said these were 3 great gifts of the Creator: the gift of the good mind, the gift of the good heart, and the gift of the good voice. We have been given as human beings the power of the good mind to reason and think our way towards peace. We have been given the power of the good heart to feel our way towards peace. And we've been given the power of the good voice to speak our way towards peace. And these 3 powers are embodied in ourselves. And you can see this commented upon in the Kitab-i Aqdas. The Peacemaker also said in Article 28, which is a large article of the Great Law, in Article 28, the Peacemaker said, your heart shall be filled with peace and goodwill, and your mind filled with yearning for the welfare of the people of the Confederacy. And all their words, meaning the words of the chiefs, all their words and actions shall be marked by calm deliberation. So if we look at these 2 statements, you see that Baha'u'llah said that the heads should be covered with the garlands of trustworthiness and faithfulness. The Peacemaker said the mind should be filled with yearning for the welfare of the people, which are, to me, relatable statements. Baha'u'llah said the heart should be dressed with the attire of the fear of the Creator. Peacemaker said the heart should be filled with peace and goodwill. The words and actions should be marked by calm deliberations, the Peacemaker said. And And there's an interesting thing here. Baha'u'llah said the tongues with absolute truthfulness. And in both the Kitab-i Aqdas and the Great Law, there's a relationship expressed a number of times between the importance of truth and the attainment of peace and justice. Baha'u'llah is saying here that the tongue should be truthful. The Peacemaker is saying all the actions should be marked by calm deliberation, that we should think, and we should be calm when we speak and when we act. The unity of religion and humanity. In the Great Law, the Peacemaker states in Article 2, if any man or nation shall obey the laws of the Great Peace, they shall be welcome to take shelter beneath the tree of the long leaves, the pine tree that was planted at the center of the Confederacy. Baha'u'llah said, consort with all religions, with amity and concord, that they may inhale from you the sweet fragrance of God, in Article 71 of the Kitab-i Aqdas. Both these articles are encouragement of peace. The Chief Jacob Swamp stated that the Confederacy had wampum belt relationships, peaceful treaties with 72 other nations. So the great peace of the Peacemaker eventually encompassed 78 nations. And these 78 nations cover a large territory in North America. When one of the pilgrims came to the New World, he wrote in his diary, I have come to a cultured garden. Remember the painting we saw with the garden, with the corn and with the squash and the beans that were growing? North America was a cultured place. The Great Plains, where there was a 60 million or so buffalo, that was a cultured area that just didn't happen. The path by which the buffalo migrated north-south was cultured. In the Northwest and Washington and Oregon and Idaho, the salmon streams and the old growth forests, all that was cultured. It was brought about by an economic theory of developing North America into a place of prosperity and wealth. And so, America, especially the East Coast, where the Confederacy and the peacefulness was, it was not wild. It was peaceful. There was a presence of peaceful consultative democracy. The unity of the people. Of course, you cannot have a democracy without unity, and you cannot have unity without justice. You cannot have justice without the law. The Peacemaker in the Great Law in Article 73 said, the great Creator has made us of one blood, and of the same soil he made us. And in other parts of the oral tradition, the Peacemaker talks about people in other lands that will someday come to this land. He also makes a comment that it won't be good, but when they do come, there are other people. So when the Peacemaker was saying, the Creator has made us, he meant all the human beings in the world. All human beings are human beings. It's not in the Kitab-i Aqdas, but in the Epistle to the Son of the Wolf, Baha'u'llah states, ye are the fruits of one tree and the leaves of one branch. Both of these statements give rise to the thought that, we are one human family. The sanctity of life. Of course, you cannot have justice without life. One of my great teachers, I consider him to be one of the best teachers I had in my entire life. In fact, I consider him to be the best teacher I ever had, was Dr. Daniel Jordan. And Dr. Daniel Jordan said, a society is just if every member of that society has a full possibility of becoming everything that they want to become. So the ultimate injustice is to end life. Because the law must bring justice to bring peace, to bring democracy. In Article 19 of the Kitab-i Aqdas, Baha'u'llah says, ye have been forbidden to commit murder. In Article 20 of the Great Law, the Peacemaker states, you have committed a grave sin in the eyes of the Creator if you murder. And it's part of a list of a number of things. I see here that the Peacemaker and Baha'u'llah missed each other by one article. But it's the same concept, it's the same thought, the importance of the sanctity of life, having respect for each other and for the lives that we have, and respect for what we want to become. Dr. Jordan said that justice on the individual level is fairness, to live in a society that's fair. We all have a fair and equal chance to be the human being that we want to be, not the human being that somebody else wants to be, the human being that we want to be. The sacredness of voice is mentioned in both laws. In the Great Law, Article 108, the Peacemaker states, "In your actions and in your conversation, do no idle thing. Speak not idle talk, neither gossip. Be careful of this, and speak not and do not give way to evil behavior." There's a concept that idle talk and gossip lead to evil doing, and evil doing leads to war. In Article 27 of the Great Law, the Peacemaker said, "All the chiefs of the Five Nations Confederacy must be honest in all things, and they must not idle or gossip." And here again, we see that concept of the importance of truthfulness of voice, that honesty. In a democracy, you must have truth. If you have untruth in a democracy, it weakens the democracy, it weakens the strength of the government. The strength of the government is the truthfulness of the society that it governs. Baha'u'llah said a similar thing in Article 9 of the Kitab-i Aqdas. "Ye have been forbidden to engage in backbiting and calumny." Calumny is dishonesty, but it's more than just dishonesty. It's also accusing other people of things they did not do. That's calumny. And again, we see this concept, the importance of the honesty of speech, and to not engage in backbiting or gossip, because these things can lead to violence, and violence can lead to war. The Peacemaker said, "All violence is a failure of the good mind." When the Peacemaker was a boy and he first came upon his relatives playing what were essentially war games, he spoke against it. At age 5 or 6, he spoke against it. In fact, he put it into the war games. If the Peacemaker was alive today and you took him to a hockey game, he would be upset at the violence in the hockey. So hockey and some sports provide a model of violent behavior. The Peacemaker put an end to all talking about war and violence. All the wars that occurred before the coming of the Great Peace were called the Dark Time. There was no speaking of that time. My father was a veteran. He was a great warrior. He was a decorated veteran. And I really respect veterans. And in Canada and the United States, we spend a lot of time honoring veterans. And that's a good thing. I'm not speaking against that. But to do it too much, the Peacemaker said, encourages war. So we should be careful with that. All violence is a failure of the good mind. All violence is a failure of the good heart. And all violence is a failure of the good voice. The protection of the home. The homes of the people in a democracy are like the cells of your own body. The individual homes are like the cells of the democracy. You cannot have a healthy democracy if you do not have healthy homes. You cannot have a healthy body if you do not have healthy cells. And so both the Peacemaker and Baha'u'llah specifically articulated the importance of the protection and the sanctity of our homes, and to be safe in our homes, to have the feeling of being safe. Many of us have grown up in times and places where we did not feel safe in our home as a child. That's a sad thing. We want to have homes where children feel safe. So in the Kitab-i Aqdas, Article 145, Baha'u'llah states, "Take heed that ye enter no house in the absence of its owner, except with permission." The Peacemaker made a similar but a little more complicated statement. He talked about a certain sign that people would have a stick and they would lean the stick against the house. And every person not entitled to enter the house, if they see that stick leaning against the front door of the house, they would not approach the house by day or by night. And they shall keep as far away from the house as their business will permit. The Great Law 107. So both the Baha'u'llah and the Peacemaker articulated that our homes must be safe. We must have safe homes to have peace and to have a good democracy. When people feel unsafe in their homes, it's very hard for them to attain justice in their own life. Peacefulness. Speaking of peacefulness, in Article 148 of the Kitab-i, Aqdas, Baha'u'llah says that we have been forbidden in the Book of God to engage in contention and conflict. That maintaining a peaceful state of being is very important, even to the extent of saying something that would disturb another person, to not engage in any kind of contention or conflict. In the Great Law, the Peacemaker makes a similar statement. It says, neither anger nor fury shall find lodgment in their minds, and all the words and actions shall be marked by calm deliberation. Notice that that's a statement that was made in Article 28 of the law as well. And maybe this is a good time to note that when the Peacemaker is speaking here in Article 24, he's speaking to the chiefs, that the chiefs shall not find anger. As a matter of fact, my understanding is that if the chief gets mad 3 times, if a chief gets mad, they're warned by the clan grandmother. If they get mad 3 times, they might be dismissed, or they would be dismissed as a chief. It's very important to be calm, to actually have a peacefulness of being. If you want to have a peaceful society, we have to be peaceful people. That's very important. So perhaps it's a good time to notice something I noticed when I was studying these laws, is a peacemaker is addressing the chiefs. Baha'u'llah is addressing all people. So from the time of the Peacemaker, the law has been extended, not just from the leadership and the kings and queens of the earth, but to all human beings. We are all now responsible for living by the law. Selfless consultation. The Iroquois Confederacy is a spiritual, consultative democracy. And to have a democracy, you have to have consultation. So again, in Article 28 of the Great Law, the Peacemaker says, in all the deliberations of the councils of chiefs, in all the efforts at lawmaking, and in all the official acts, self-interest shall be cast into oblivion. To set yourself aside and to think of the people and the welfare of the people. In Section 30 of the Kitab-i Aqdas, here they missed each other by 2. It is incumbent upon them to take counsel together and have regard for the interest of the servants of God for his sake, even as they regard their own interests. This is a statement about the process of consultation. It is the advisement of the creator of Baha'u'llah and the Peacemaker, that we don't think of ourselves, that we think of the interests of the people for the sake of the Creator. And when we take counsel together, we put ourselves aside and think of the people. This is the Confederacy Wampum Belt that represents the first 5 nations. And Wampum Belts were binary codes. They were binary codes based upon light and dark beads, and based upon light and dark beads embedded in symbols. So on the East Coast, almost every tribe, as far as I know, could read a wampum belt. In other words, a Mohawk could make a wampum belt in Mohawk, and a Seminole in Florida could read the belt in their own language. So it's kind of like a system of writing that people understood. I mentioned that Chief Jacob Swamp said the Confederacy had wampum belt relationships with 72 other nations. So it was a system of writing. So when they say the law was not written, it's actually not true. There was a system of writing where the wampum belts were related to the 117 statements of law, which are sometimes called 117 wampums or 117 wampum belts. The number 9 is important. The number of Baha. In the Kitab-i Aqdas, Baha'u'llah states that the Lord hath ordained for every city a house of justice. It be established wherein shall gather counselors to the number of Baha, which is 9. In Article 6 of the Great Law, the Peacemaker says, no council of the Confederate chiefs shall be legal, unless all, as I'm adding this 9 members, that's not in the original, all the Mohawk chiefs are present. Different nations have different number of chiefs, but the Mohawks have 9 chiefs. All 9 chiefs must be present for the spiritual consultation to begin. I don't know why number 9 is important, but I know that it is, and I appreciate that. Reducing arms, concept of collective security. I'm unable to actually, I know this is a quote from Shoghi Effendi in God Passes By. And in that quote, Shoghi Effendi says, the principle of collective security, he unreservedly recommends that the reduction of national armaments. There's this concept that when the nations of the earth come together, the armaments will be reduced. When armaments are reduced, less money is spent on armaments. And when less money is spent on armament, the money can be spent on the development of a higher level of civilization and the establishment of peace among nations. In Article 65 of the Great Law, Peacemaker makes a similar statement. I, Degana and the Confederate chiefs, now uproot the tallest pine tree, and into the cavity thereby made, we cast all weapons of war. Into the depths of earth, down into the deep underneath currents of water flowing to unknown regions, we cast all the weapons of strife. We bury them from sight, and we plant the tree again. Thus shall the great peace be established, and hostility shall no longer be known between the 5 nations, but peace to a united people. So the idea of burying the weapons, the idea of reducing armaments, of course, people still had some weapons for hunting and for defense, but the armaments that were held among the nations were greatly reduced. Prohibition against covenant breaking. I'll ask your forgiveness to comment on this. I've heard many Baha'is in my Baha'i life statement state that the Kitab-i Aqdas is the first spiritual law that has a prohibition against covenant breaking. And in a certain way, that's not true, because covenant breaking is against the law of the great law of peace as well. So we'll take a look at that. In Article 2 of the Kitab-i Aqdas, Baha'u'llah states, they that have violated the covenant of God by breaking his commandments and have turned back on their heels, these have erred grievously in the sight of God. So it's a prohibition against covenant breaking. Of course, if you break the covenant, you are, expelled from the faith. And the thing that amazed me about this statement is the phrase, and have turned back on their heels, which sounds like a very Aboriginal symbolic statement. In the Great Law, the Peacemaker says, if a chief of the Confederacy should seek to establish any authority independent of the jurisdiction of the Confederacy of the Great Peace, which is the 5 nations, he shall be warned 3 times in open council. If the offending lord, and some documents of the chiefs are called lords, if the offending lord is still obdurate, he shall be dismissed by the war chief of his nation for refusing to conform to the laws of the Great Peace. So this is a prohibition against covenant breaking, and it's the covenant, the law of the peace. It's a prohibition, and again here it's applied to the chiefs, but Baha'u'llah has applied it to all. Justice. Justice is very important. It's mentioned 6 times in the Great Law of Peace, and Baha'u'llah said that in the second of the hidden words, Baha'u'llah said that justice was most about. I don't have the quote right here, unfortunately. I'm not seeing it. So in the second of the hidden words, Baha'u'llah talks about justice and how important it is. And one of the things he says that's really quite incredible to me, he says, my gift to thee is justice. Well, we discussed the fact that justice is the ability to become what we can become. So when Baha'u'llah says, my gift to thee is justice, the real gift to us is to be able to be ourselves and to become what it is that we can be, which is made possible by the establishment of the law and the bringing of the peace. Abdu'l-Baha states in Baha'i world faith, he has ordained and established a house of justice, which is endowed with political as well as religious function, consummate union of blending church and state. And this was a statement that, this arises from the Kitab-i Aqdas. In the Great Law, again in Article 28, the Peacemaker said, the Confederate chiefs will live according to the Constitution of Great Peace and exercise justice in all affairs. Justice is the cornerstone of the law and the institutions of the law. Justice is the stepping stones of each of our individual paths of our own becoming. And justice is the lodestone that attracts the purified hearts of men and women seeking justice. The purified hearts. The hearts must be purified. When the Peacemaker appeared, people were submerged in violence and war. It was a dark time. And the powers that the Peacemaker used two great powers to heal the hearts that enabled them to receive the law. And one is the power of forgiveness through the condolence ceremony, and one is the power of thanksgiving through the Thanksgiving address. And through these emotional powers, just these two, generations of war were changed into generations of peace. The power of thanksgiving and the power of forgiveness are great powers. They're great powers to help people rise to a higher order state of emotional competence. Peacemaker said, my message will bring an end to the wars between the East and the West. The word I bring is that all people shall love one another and live together. We stated this before, but I want to compare it here to Baha'u'llah's statement in the Book of the Covenant, which arises again from the Kitab-i Aqdas. The aim of this wrong one in sustaining woes and tribulation, in revealing the holy verses and in demonstrating proofs, have been not but to quench the flame of hate and enmity, that the horizon of the hearts of men shall be illumined with the light of the accord and attain real peace and tranquility. Illumine the horizon. Black Elk said he was looking to the eastern horizon, and it rose a daybreak star. Me represents the coming of the law. I don't know why, but the Peacemaker and Baha'u'llah both suffered for 40 years. Peacemaker went through many trials and tribulations, tests and difficulties as he traveled among the people, teaching the principles of the law that he wanted to, building the foundation to establish the Confederacy. Baha'u'llah also suffered for 40 years of exile and imprisonment. Black Elk said the first peace, which is a peace that people realize within themselves. The second peace is a peace between two people. And the third peace is a peace between nations. And it's an amazing statement that Black Elk makes, that the peace between nations will not be known until there is peace within the souls of men. So when the Peacemaker was at the end of his life, he predicted, other people would come here and there would be a great time of suffering. My friend Mad Bear, that I actually knew as a friend, he's passed on now, but he was an elder when I was young. And he said this, that the Peacemaker, that would be a time, he predicted a time when Native people were reduced to almost nothing, that we would not be welcome in any city or any town, that there would be no place that would welcome us or be happy that we are there, that we would be reduced to almost like the dust on the land. A white serpent would come and would start eating everything and taking all the resources, and that the Ganawida told the people that we would come to a terrible state. But then it is said that the Peacemaker said that a great light would come from the east, and that he would be that great light, that the Ganawida is the great light. And as he approaches, people realize that it is him. It is a light brighter than the sun. And this is a statement of the Peacemakers that has really kept me going in the hard times of my life when I've had difficulties. It is an amazing statement. The Peacemaker said, the native nations will become stronger than before. because of knowledge nullification, the nullification of our knowledges and our understanding about things, that very few people realize the greatness of the nations that were here. And at the end of his life, and this is an incredible statement, and it's not actually in the Great Law of Peace, and it's not in the writing of Chief John Gibson, but I've asked a number of elders to confirm that this is really a statement that comes from the oral tradition, because it is an amazing statement. At the end of his life, before his passing, the Peacemaker stated that he had brought peace to 5 nations, but that he would return. He would return and bring peace to all nations. And it's my belief, as looking from my perspective towards the Kitab-i, Aqdas, the Baha'i faith, that the Peacemaker has come again, as he said he would. He's brought the great law again, as he said he would. He's brought it for all nations, as he said he would. And the peace will come to nations eventually, as he said it would. A while back, I had a dream. I call it the sitting at the kitchen table with my grandfather dream. I have it every now and then. My grandfather comes and speaks to me. And, we believe that dreaming on the highest level is spiritual experience. So I believe this is actually a visit. My grandfather came and visited me in a dream, and he said, grandson, the prophecies that you've talked about, they are going to come true. There is a difficult time coming to human beings, but after that difficult time, there will be a peace on earth. And my grandfather said, I come to your dream tonight, grandson, to tell you that you will not live through the hard time, and you will not see the peace on earth. But I also tell you, he said, I come to your dream to tell you that from among your children, there will at least one, he said, and maybe more, and he repeated that twice, and maybe more of your children will live to see the time of peace on earth. And he said, grandson, you can be happy to know that our generations will go on and our people will endure into the peace that is coming. Baha'u'llah said, I am the quickener of the world and its peacemaker. When I learned that the healing tablet was the names of the prophets that appeared before, I went to it right away and read it to see if the Peacemaker's name was in there. It wasn't in there, and I was so disappointed. But my disappointment was relieved when the Persian elder told me that the reason Peacemaker was not in there is that because Peacemaker was one of the names that the Baha'u'llah claimed for himself in this life, and he didn't mention those in the healing tablet. But he did mention Lord of the Dawn. He mentioned Quetzalcoatl, O Lord of the Dawn. When I saw that, I was very happy because I realized that Baha'u'llah, while penning that prayer, by writing that prayer, the long healing tablet, he remembered at least one that I knew of, prophet from Turtle Island, from North America. And there's probably more in there that I don't know about. I was very glad that, as he said, on the other side of the earth, he remembered the prophets that had appeared in this land. And Shoghi Effendi states in God Passes By that one of the names that Baha'u'llah claimed for himself was the pre-existent root. Remember at the beginning we said that the Peacemaker said that when the 4 right roots of peace touch on the other side of the world, when the roots touch, the law will come again. And to me, this statement means that Baha'u'llah is saying, I am that root. I am that pre-existent root. I am the root that's growing around the earth. And he acknowledged that the words of the Peacemaker, and that when the roots touch on the other side of the world, the law will come again. To me, that's an amazing thing. The Peacemaker established the Longhouse for the 6 nations. Baha'u'llah established a universal house for all nations. It's an amazing thing. To me, the Baha'i faith is the Longhouse of the world. I invite you to embrace the peace that arises from the justice, that arises from the law. So, several closing statements here. Black Elk said, "Hear me, that they may once more go back into the sacred hoop and find the good red road, the shielding tree, which represents the law." Baha'u'llah said, "Yet it shall be, these fruitless strifes and these ruinous wars shall pass away. The most great peace will come." And the Peacemaker said, they say this statement was made at the meeting of the first chiefs of the Confederacy. The first time the chiefs were coming in to the Haudenosaunee, the Longhouse. The Peacemaker said to him, "So this is your work, then peace will emerge among the people." You know, one time I was at a feast at University of British Columbia, which is a very diverse community. There were Hindu people there, there were Buddhists, there were Muslims, there were, of course, Baha'is, there were some Native people there, there's even some Christians. We were all sitting in that room, and I thought to myself, some of these people would have been enemies in different places in the world. They would have been as enemies. And I thought how wonderful it must have been when the chiefs of the Confederacy came into spiritual consultative democracy with people that had been enemies for countless generations. What a wonderful thing that must have been. And what a wonderful thing it was to be in that feast. And so this is our work. This is our work, to extend the peace and the justice to all human beings. This is our work. The Peacemaker said, all human beings have a right to dignity by virtue of birth. All human beings, by virtue of birth, have a right to dignity. This phrase actually made its way, and other phrases like it, into the American Constitution, into the American Declaration of Independence. The first sentence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator. Notice the word choice, creator, not God. Very Iroquois word choice. Endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The first person to sign that statement, John Hancock, had learned the Mohawk language. He went to the Longhouse. He listened to the laws. He took Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and Benjamin Franklin to the Longhouse so that they could hear the law. And John Hancock was given the honorary Mohawk name of Great Tree, meaning the law, that the law was being given to another democracy that would form. And so it comes to us now that it is our work to extend this dignity to people that are so hurting in the world. You know, last week, Brother Kevin Locke mentioned a term in his talk which just jumped out at me, the lifeless darkness. The lifeless darkness that so many people are submerged in by colonialism, by racism, by prejudice, by being exiled from their country. You know, that by suffering from starvation and wars, suffering from wars and suffering from droughts and environmental problems, environmental refugees. So many people are downtrodden. This is our work now, to extend dignity to human beings. So I'll close with one of my favorite pictures of myself and some of my daughters, all my relations. Thank you for listening today. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak. All my relations.
Thank you so much, Lee. That was really really fantastic and beautiful, really beautiful. And we have been getting comments from people about how much they have been moved by your presentation. Several people, Seraphim Winslow, this talk is phenomenal. Every member of every Congress and Parliament in the world should hear this and learn. Brian says, thank you again for this wonderful talk. So quite a few people have responded very positively this way. And we have a few questions coming in as well. Phil Lane says, thank you, brother, for sharing this, by the way.
Hey, Phil.
So that's nice to see. Thank you for an inspiring and educational talk. Thank you so much from Kristen. Lori says, is there a way to receive a copy of this so we can soak this in more deeply? We have the slideshow already up on the website for this particular talk at wilmetteinstitute.org, and we will have the recording of this talk available there as well within about 24 hours. It takes us a little time to do some cleaning of it and getting it set up. Nancy Ackerman, so moving and uplifting, I will be sharing it widely. Marty Edelstein, Yahweh Toda.
Yahweh Toda.
You have been Yahweh Toda. You have been a teacher to me as well for a long time. And Mary Gubatayo. He moved on me. Gubatayo.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lee. Raisa Gibbs, this has brought me to tears. Thank you for this wonderful talk. Steve Collins says, I'm gladdened that the Peacemaker's message is remembered to this day. And Lori King, thank you, Lee. You uplifted up my heart. Gunalshish. Leslie, sorry, thanks. Thank you immensely. Cannot wait to share the recording widely and listen to it again myself. Seraphim asks about the white serpent of consumerism, whether the white serpent could refer to that, I guess is her question.
Oh, the white serpent is, the consumption of everything in the environment, the consumption of forestry. It's talked about the snake would go across mountains and you would see its path where the trees have disappeared, the digging into the earth, the mining, the extraction, the economy based on resources extraction, whereas native economy was kind of based on this principle, first do no harm. Now, if you've got an economic enterprise that's going to hurt the environment, then you've lessened everything for everybody. So economic development must strengthen the environment. That was a principle of the economic development before Columbus. And there were great economies that existed here and trade routes and, there was wealth, people had wealth and people had food. There's lots of food in North America. People ate well, people were healthy.
Yeah.
It is consumerism. It's driven by consumerism and driven by people living according to their wants rather than living according to their needs.
Yep. And they managed the environment well as well. Frequently, they knew how to maximize the cover of things for deer so that there would be plenty of deer and these kinds of things. So they really did some remarkable environmental work to develop the environment here. Harold Gibson says, Miigwech, this has been part of my life and I've talked about it for many times. Gary says, fantastic. I too am wiping tears from my eyes. So you really have hit a chord with many, many people. Not sure what other questions to mention here. I don't see any other questions right offhand, but I'm sure we'll get some.
That's good.
Yeah.
No questions.
Marvin Holiday has a question. Nope, he raised his hand. I think if people are trying to, I think raising your hand is a chance for us to give you a microphone and camera, but we generally don't do that. So people should put their comments in the question and answer session, which we can then read out loud to people, or they can put them in chat. And that's, we found generally much more efficient. Trying to turn cameras on and off takes a long time and can be a problem. Kay, I think that's Larson. I heard you give a talk in Whitehorse years ago. I was deeply gladdened with this comparison then, and I'm refreshed to hear it again. Happy to know it will be available for others on the website.
Yeah, Kay Larson.
He's taken some
I know Kay
courses. Yeah. you've really found a lot of parallels between the Peacemaker and the most great peacemaker, you might say. So that's really quite impressive. Nadema says, Osio, brother. Osio. Greetings from your New York City sister.
Yeah,
Osio. And Kay says, we are glad to hear and see this. Mike and Kay Schwartz in Alaska. So we have an audience from really quite a wide-ranging area. Kevin Locke, amazing, Brother Lee. Let's make this one viral too.
Thank you, Kevin.
Good. That's good.
I so enjoyed Kevin's talk.
Rachel,
last week. It was so good.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed it. Rachel Naipaul, thank you, sir, for your presentation. We have learned so much today. Wes Dyring says, Lee, thank you so much for your wonderful talk. Your book, Warriors of the Rainbow, helped me to understand more deeply a visionary dream I had when I was 12 that led me to the Baha'i faith. The Woman Institute courses I took with Paula Bidwell, also transformed my life. And this is a good chance to remember Paula. God bless her soul and all the things she did for people, and to encourage the study of Native traditions. She really, as I understand it, was a traditional person very much, and understood the traditional ways and respected them greatly. And we will remember her, I think, for many, many decades as a result. Kay Schwartz, we will be sharing this many times. Steve Collins says, can you expand on the snakes that were red and black and how things proceeded to the end of the struggle?
I can't. I've always wondered about that myself, but I know there are theories about it, but I just don't have it in my mind right now. I can't.
Interesting.
I don't have that with me right now. I know that's.
Buck wants to know where the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I know that I've talked about that, Chris. But that was a long time ago. I don't know it in enough detail right now. I'd have to review it. I can't comment on that. Sorry.
That happens. I'm often stuck too. And
my grandfather told me.
Chris asked. Yes. Go ahead.
My grandfather told me you have to make sure what you know for sure. And he said, grandson, you never know much for sure. So I don't like to speculate. I would have to go back over that to be able to say it properly.
Chris Buck asks, well, the location of the PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint is located on the Woman Institute website. If you click on webinars, that will pop up the current webinars, and this one would be on top until it's, of course, in the past. Then you have to go down to the past webinars, and you can find it there. And Chris, if you send me an email, I'll send it to you so you can post it to the course. One person just asked a very interesting question. Do you think that the white stone canoe could be a symbol of the covenant? Jean Rohani asks that question.
I have never had that thought. The white stone canoe was an actual canoe that was actually carved. When the Peacemaker was young, he went into the woods day after day, and there was, said in the tradition, 11 young men that went with him, and one of the things they did was carve this canoe, and eventually his mother and grandmother came to see it, and they say that the Peacemaker sensed what was in his grandmother's mind, that she thought the canoe would not float. And so without his grandmother saying anything, the Peacemaker said to her, tomorrow you will see that this will float. I've often wondered how a stone canoe floats myself. But I think that the stone canoe was important because it's one of the things that made people think that, how does this canoe floating? And it made people think, well, maybe this person has something we should listen to because he has a canoe that's made of stone. That's a very unusual thing. And so it opened people's hearts to what he had to say. I don't know that the tree is a symbol of the covenant and a symbol of the law. And last week in Kevin's great talk, Kevin Locke, he talked about the pipe being a symbol of the covenant for the Lakota people, and I was very happy to hear Kevin say that, because I've had that thought myself, that the pipe, I sometimes look at the pipe and think it is the Ark of the Covenant. For us, it's a pipe, and
Mm-hmm.
and it would be the tree. But I've never thought of the canoe as being symbolic of the law. But that's an interesting thought. I'll think about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A pipe, a canoe made out of stone can float as long as it displaces enough water. Obviously, metal boats all float for that same very reason. But how you would carve a canoe out of stone, I don't know, and what kind of stone you'd want to use. It's an interesting idea. It does sound like a symbolic statement of some sort, but well, who knows? Erica Taylor says, "Good talk, brother. Hope you are considering presenting at the Parliament of Religions." And that's a good point. Is the Parliament of Religions deadline is the 30th of this month, and anyone who has a possible presentation on religion should consider proposing it to the Parliament. And if they email the Wilmette Institute, we can provide you with the information how to present something. It's been sent out repeatedly here in the United States to Baha'is, and there are links to the Parliament website where you can both register to attend the Parliament, which is a virtual institution this year. It's not going to be face-to-face. And you can also propose a panel presentation or an individual talk. Marty says, "Wampum belts are a binary universal language. Stellar. This is the first time I thought of them this way. Would love to learn more about how this coding rose." I don't know, how much do we know about the coding in the wampum belts?
Well, I don't know that much of it myself. I don't know the code, but it is very interesting, and I have a number of authors from the Confederacy that have commented on it. So I have that from several sources. But yeah, I don't know the code myself. It is interesting. It's a binary code, and we're back now with computers. We're back to the same thing. 1, 0, and 1, and the binary code was light and dark.
Yeah. We have the URL of the PowerPoint now added to chat for anyone who's looking for it. Laurie King says, "Your grandfather was very wise." And so you've referred to him a few times. Michael Ross says he's listening from the Azores Islands. "Thank you so much for your talk. It helps us understand our work in a much wider, more embracing way. We will be better for it. Thank you again." So that's quite nice. And Bonita Rico says, "Puerto Rico is listening. Allahu Abha."
Oh, yeah.
Kay Larson says, "Universities today have contests among engineering students to build a concrete canoe to display their knowledge and skills. Wonder if it came from this origin."
Oh, wow.
I've never heard of that. That's interesting. That
there's a thought.
I didn't know that they have common. Yeah. Harold adds that if it was porous, so it would float, it could also be easily carved. So that's an interesting idea.
Maybe soapstone.
We didn't actually go into the exactly. Yeah, something that's relatively soft and easy to carve. We never went into any detail about the Peacemaker and the struggles he had to get the Five Nations to listen to him. But that itself is quite a remarkable story, and the role of the women in making that happen is a remarkable story as well. And the resulting role of women in the organization of the League is also very, very interesting. The fact that they chose the chiefs, and they could dethrone, shall we say, dethrone the chiefs as well, is also quite interesting. Do you know of any parallels of the writing from Daganoweda and Baha'u'llah about when Daganoweda says, in fact, he is going to be working her beneath and on the other side of the sun? I haven't heard anything about that. In fact, he is going to be working her beneath and on the other side of the sun. That's Kristen Halliday asks about that.
I don't know about that.
And she says it's from section 9, I guess, of the
law?
Account of the law. Richard Eastburn says, "Excellent presentation, and thank you for bringing up the memory of Dan Jordan." And that's very true. He was someone very special that people still remember very fondly to this day.
He was Dr. Jordan was the only professor I ever had where I lost track of time in the classroom. You know, the time went by so fast. You know, it's just incredible. It's totally captivating. Matter of fact, him and I were going to a thing in San Francisco, and we had a flat tire on the way home in East LA. And so we got this all-night garage, and they were changing the tire, and there was all kinds of people coming through, 3 a.m. in East LA. And he had them all, they all were gathered around him, and he was talking about what you could learn from changing a tire. These are street people. It was just incredible. I mean, he's just an incredible person.
Yeah, I wish I had known him. Other than I saw him at a few things. I never actually met him, unfortunately. Harold notes Dr. Jordan inspired him to pioneer to New Mexico. So there's another. Harold Gibson mentions this. There's another reference to Jordan. Lori King asks about Kevin's talk from last week and whether it's available. That talk was given just for the students in our course on The Great Spirit Speaks, Voices of the Wise Ones, and perhaps we will make it available at some point in the future, but I'll have to talk to the faculty about that and find out where they've recorded it and how they've saved it, because I'm not familiar with those details. What else do we have here? A few more comments in the Q&A as well. Gary says, have you given this talk to non-Baha'i audiences, including Native American audiences, and what kind of responses have you received?
I have not. I've only given it in like Baha'i firesides. I haven't given it outside I have not done so.
Yeah,
I might be afraid to do so.
Well, now, of course, everybody will be able to find your talk and hear it. But you did a very good job, a very careful comparison. So I think I think it'll hold up.
Yeah, I hope it's seen as a legal analysis. Not any kind of authority on either one, but you can't help but see the commonality of the two laws, which of course are just representations of the one divine law that always exists.
Yep, that's very true. You had mentioned the dating of the Peacemaker from astronomical events. I gather there was some sort of oral tradition of an eclipse of the sun or something.
Yeah. There was that, and there were some other things I can't recall right now, but a woman of the Confederacy, a woman of the Longhouse, her name is slipping my mind right now, but she wrote an entire PhD thesis on the timing of the Peacemaker's coming, and she is dated at 1142.
Yeah, that's very helpful to have something quite definite like that. It's also earlier than I would have thought, because I thought he came closer to the time of the arrival of the Europeans, but
there's a great debate about that. That's a debate. Oops, I lost you.
Can you see me?
Oh, there you are.
Yeah,
my
internet has been unstable.
I was going to try to find that woman, that name that I want to make. I think I know it, but I don't want to say it unless I'm sure.
Well, if you're looking at that, I'll read another comment here. Leslie says, do not be afraid to share this widely. Please do. This is so moving and will clearly move the peace efforts forward. Well, we'll have it up on the Wilmette Institute's website for the whole public, and we'll certainly mention it in all of our newsletters and everything for a month or two. So we'll share it widely in that sense, and perhaps more widely if it goes viral, as someone commented, and people are sharing it to their friends. And we certainly hope that will be the case. We want to see it seen widely.
Okay, I want to
Mary.
It's very important to correct that statement I just made. The person that wrote that did the PhD is Dr. Barbara Mann, Mann, and I don't think she's a member of the Confederacy. I'm not sure about that, but it was Dr. Barbara Mann, PhD at the University of Toledo. I worked with Jerry Fields, an astronomer and mathematician, same institution, determined the birth date based upon scientific data and oral history, August 31st, 1142. Dr. Barbara Mann, Mann. Yeah, okay, somebody wants to look up that. You can go on these research sites and find the academic.
You can find it.
You might be able to find it on Google Scholar. Put her name into Google Scholar. If you put my name in Google Scholar, my thesis comes up.
That's good. Mary Gudabayo says, I hope you will give this talk for ancient cedars. We hope to be able to post this talk on our website also. What's ancient cedars?
Ancient Cedars is a group of Native people that meet once a month just to talk about what's happening and say prayers and consultations. Mary's the daughter of Ruby Gubatayo, who I consider to be my spiritual mother, and took me to my first fireside. And so, yeah, maybe.
Well, no doubt they'll hear from it. And Boyd says we don't have it. That's all the comments from social media. So I guess we've gotten all of those comments. We'll see what else comes along here. It's been certainly quite good to see the huge numbers of positive comments and ideas coming from this talk, and I'm sure it will be a popular talk in the future. As I mentioned to you, our very first webinar in 2015 has been watched something like 20,000 times. And of course, all of these talks just keep increasing the number of views. People are going onto our website and seeing them all the time. We have, I think, 4,000 or 5,000 subscribers now. So the talks are continuing to be viewed by larger and larger numbers of people. Okay. I don't see any other comments right offhand. So I think perhaps, here's Kay also. It would be interesting now to compare the law of the Great Peace with the peace statement prepared by the Universal House of Justice in 1985. That's an intriguing idea.
I've done that, actually, and I wasn't going to mention it, but I wrote a book on this subject that was accepted for publication by George Ronald, but now that maybe because of difficulties it won't happen, but because of COVID. But I'd have a whole section of the book that looks at the peace statement and the great law. And when we're looking in the book, I also analyze, what was the process by which the peacemaker brought peace, and what is the process by which Baha'u'llah moves us to the lesser peace and the most great peace. So that's in there. Maybe it'll be published someday. I don't know.
Let's hope so. What's the title?
Same as, well, the title that I chose, but when you have a publisher, they sometimes change the title, but it was the same as the title of this talk, Most Great Peace and Most Holy Book.
Very good. Very good. Well, I think we can wrap up now. I want to thank everybody for, of course, listening and participating. I want to thank Lee in particular for this fantastic and fascinating and very moving presentation. We're very grateful to you for your time and for this effort and for all the research that you've done to pull this together and refine it over the years. So we are all beneficiaries of your wisdom and your experience in this case. We're very grateful.
Thank you.
And again, to the audience, thank you. And to the audience, thank you very much for joining us on this day. And the Wilmette Institute wants to thank everyone also for your service to humanity. Let us all continue to provide our service, and we look forward to seeing everybody in the next couple of weeks at our next talk. Thank you very much, and have a good day, everyone.